Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I want to talk to you about my very favorite gear for 2022. Now, first off, before I go any further, I want to thank my Patreon patrons. You mean the world to me. You make the channel possible. Thank you very much. But I know what you're thinking. Well, Nick, you always do gear of the year. You give your the very best gear of every year. But the problem with that this year is I've been thinking about this in the run-up to this time. I've been thinking, can I really do that right now? Because in order to say this is the very best thing that came out in 2022, I really have to have surveyed the field. And this year, I feel like I don't know that I have. I have been busier than ever with my 9-to-5 job, right? And I wasn't able to make it to any major shows. And I was plunged into abject chaos not once, but twice this year. And so it's been a little bit busy. I haven't even had the energy to do the Terrible Knives live streams. Those are not dead, by the way. They're just zombies, I guess. But I hope they're going to return soon. But nonetheless, I've been keeping up with the channel. I've been continuing to review, but it's been at a much lower pace. And I've had to tell a lot of people no. And in fact, I've chosen to discontinue some of the relationships I had with makers who were sending review samples, especially the ones who struggled to see the difference between like influencer and reviewer. Those are different things, but not everybody sees that. And instead, I'm just buying the samples, buying things outright from retailers for those kinds of companies. I think it just makes things a little bit easier. And it makes my patrons more important. But anyways, I digress. I don't feel like I can say this year what the very best gear that was released was, because I don't know that I've seen enough of it in all of the various fields. Instead, what I'm going to talk a little bit about this year is, first off, what I saw as trends in the market in 2022. And then I want to talk a little bit more about some of the gear that brought me the most joy as I was going through this year. So we'll start off in the knife market. It has been a wildly boring year in the knife world, right? There have been a plurality of new releases that feel like iterations of old ones. Whether these are flash-in-a-pan sprint runs that are gone in 20 minutes anyways, or minor variations of tried-and-true designs, or knives that feel like they're not distinct enough that anybody cares. They're just like the same thing over and over and over again, and the result is just another SKU to discontinue quietly in 6 months, right? And several of the big players have either stepped back entirely, focusing on sprints and rehashing old ideas, or have kept up production of existing products, right? And so some of the most interesting companies historically have been on autopilot, so there's been very little interesting from them. One cool thing that has been out there is we've seen many self-published knives. This is where designers, and this is one of them, the Winterblade Co-Factor, work with Chinese OEMs to create knives under their own brand. This is Winterblade Co., which didn't exist as of, well, not so long ago, but now does. And this has resulted in some very neat pieces, and it's honestly been one of the few sources of creativity in the market this year, but it has also meant a glut of micro brands, oftentimes having new designer problems in their work, but asking prices that are running with the big dogs, right? So although it's really great to see a lot of creative folks flooding into the market, more than ever I'm reminded that there is a lot of value to editing and criticism during the design process long before a drop ever lands, right? Folks are getting one prototype before the run when they should be doing many stages, sending them around, tweaking them, right? And so you get these problems in production that should have been fixed 3 iterations ago. And so, these micro brand kind of things, these self-published things, they can be really great, but big prices and big orders need big perfection, or they got a big problem. On the budget front, things have been getting more and more expensive. I mean, it's really exciting, for instance, the Chinese OEMs discovered button locks. That was kind of cool, right? And it stemmed the tide of boring liner locks a little bit, but it really hasn't helped the boring part that much. And the low-end budget price has also been creeping up, right? With $35 to $40 knives landing at $50 to $60. And some OEMs have been getting a little too big for their britches, pretending that $80 price points make sense for very basic designs. But whatever. And then, of course, the supply chain has been absolutely wild. Even some of the mainstays of the EDC world have been hard to get. And although it's recovering some, it's often felt like you can have a knife that's good quality, good value, or good availability, but you can only pick 2 of those, right? And so as a result, something being in stock wasn't generally a good thing about that thing. That's not to say that there's nothing interesting that's happened. I'll talk about a couple of things that have been really nice, but it was kind of few and far between. And even my group chats, full of passionate enthusiasts dedicated to knives, have either mostly gone quiet or have refocused on other things. And when you combine this with a general slowdown economically, general price inflation, and the loss of a number of creative voices in the community, unfortunately, it's been a pretty rough year for knives. And so I hope 2023 is a year of creativity and value as much as 2022, that is, was about stagnation and inflation. So that's been the knife world. The watch market has been horrifying. I'm going to be real with you here. He had massive price increases, abysmal availability. both artificial and genuine supply constraints. Price gouging, scalping, bundling, and anti-consumer ridiculousness everywhere. Having a good AD who knows you and doesn't want to screw you over is more important than ever. And the wild laziness of the really big watchmakers has been just crazy. Been a very real, strong sense of, well, why would we bother trying? It's going to sell regardless, right? And so, as a result, 2022 has been a pretty good year to get out of watches. Of course, there have been some nice pieces out there, but it's just been rough out there. I will say, very heartened lately. Seeing the bottom fall out of the luxury watch market has been delightful. And I hope that a great many scalpers find themselves underwater on a bunch of inventory, cut their losses, and drive those prices further down. Right? When we're seeing smaller brands that are genuinely trying achieves really incredible value, right? With better features and finishing that's just as good as the big boys, I gotta say, that's a wonderful thing, right? Some of the big brands end up feeling like dinosaurs just begging for an asteroid. But I hope that this softening market, as well as pressure from brands that are actually trying to innovate and deliver value, remind these companies that there's more to product development and marketing than slapping the brand fans over and over and again in the face and asking them who daddy is, right? That's not the way you should go about things. I'll still look at some of the big brand stuff, but it's just increasingly hard for me to imagine paying an extra 50% for a symbol on the dial, right? And often the costs of good and interesting features like we're seeing from, it's so much nicer in the micro brand space right now. And so that's been a thing. Maybe I'm dreaming here, though. I got to admit, the idea that the big brands are going to change course and start trying again is a little wild, but maybe the big brands won't. Maybe they'll continue their path towards being so stodgy and stuffy and overpriced and unobtainable that no one ends up caring. Right now, they're burning brand equity and cachet with newer collectors to keep those prices inflated. This will do short-term profits for sure, but with a long-term consequence. Right now, they're heading towards losing a generation, right? I mean, what's the thing? You don't buy a high-end watch, you're taking care of it for the next generation. Yeah, well, if they keep this up, the next generation will inherit a watch from these brands, decide, you know what? Not sure I'm that kind of person, and then sell it to someone slightly younger than you who hasn't died yet, and go buy an Apple Watch, right? When people grow up with brands being snobby and greedy and hostile to new collectors, the brands lose relevance and cachet, and eventually they're alone in an ivory tower with only a couple of simps left at the bottom to send up food, and it's only a matter of time. But either way, look, as much as I decry the economic circumstances here, the bottom falling out of the secondary market and increased pressure on makers from micro brands who are doing better can only be beneficial to end users who just love good timepieces. And so, in general, this has felt a little bit more like a win for watch consumers than we've had in a while. So I hope 2023 is a year of competition, of effort, and letting the product improve the brand rather than using the brand to foist unimpressive product. Flashlight front has been bad this year. It's been more boring black tubes from the same 10 OEMs, or very expensive high-performance products with built-in non-serviceable batteries designed to need replacement in a couple of years, right? The products that are like that, they're amazing at that very moment, but they're doomed to fail, right? They're obsolescent by design. And so, right, the repair has never been more relevant in the flashlight world, and so there are lots of good lights out there, but it's just not been exciting. And so I hope that 2023 has more repairable and more innovative stuff in the flashlight world. Pens, honestly, pens have been the nicest part of the EDC world this year, right? We've been seeing some really cool stuff. We've been seeing evergreen models that are being sold consistently with the same functional basis, but with limited run cosmetic variants, like this dragon scale guy coming from Smooth Precision Pens. Really neat idea, right? You're making something aesthetic a limited edition, but you're making those regularly so that you can grab that, but it's not like you're not going to be able to get a good tool, right? That's a very, very impressive thing. And we're also seeing other brands doing things like different coatings, different styles, different colorations, that kind of thing in limited runs. But that way, people who love the item can love a new one of them. I've also seen the rebirth of one of my very favorite companies. Urban Survival Gear became Smooth Precision Pens and immediately started dropping great pens with excellent variations, as well as with a great commitment to repair and service and upgradability that, although it's often been there in the pen world, there's not been nearly as much issues as in like the light world. It's never been a direct marketing point before, and I really hope that continues to be a thing. And Shown Design actually has been testing a bespoke in-house fountain pen nib. I haven't had one on the table yet. I hope it's a beautiful thing, but even that idea is very interesting. The idea of going away from the Jowo or Yowo and the Bach nibs and those kinds of things to a fully in-house pen, I love that. I think this is going to be a really nice way for artists to push their work a little bit higher and to take advantage of the machining that's going on out there. So I really like what some of the stuff that's going on in the pen world, right? With evergreen models and limited cosmetic variants, with, increased quality, increased precision, and potentially some more vertical stuff. Now, with all of that said about the market, let's go into the stuff that's bringing me the most joy this year. We'll start off by getting into watches. Do not get into watches. The watch that has absolutely been my favorite of this year has been this guy right here. This is the Formex Reef GMT. This is an absolutely wonderful watch from a company that I've really come to appreciate and respect. Formex is a company that is trying very, very hard to make the very best watches that they can. And this, I think all of their stuff has shown this, but this shows it very, very strongly because the finishing is very good. The features are very, very good. Why I find myself when I wear this watch, or even just think about it, like, why am I buying a high-end luxury brand when I can get this, which is a high-end luxury watch, for 1/3 of the price with better features? Things like instant, quick release on bracelets, which is not a thing really elsewhere, and toolless quick adjusts and replaceable bezels and all of that kind of stuff. Why am I paying big brand money when I can get better features and nearly equivalent finishing for way, way less, all with a movement that is much easier and cheaper to service, right? Because you're not reliant on parts from any, one specific fancy manufacturer. At this point in time, this has been a watch that has been on my wrist a lot. The Reef and now this Reef GMT variant are absolutely wonderful, and I am more excited to hear about a new release from Formex than I am from Omega, because I know that they're going to do it right, rather than doing most of the work, stopping, shrugging, and saying, it'll sell, right? I really appreciate the effort here, and that effort leads to really great consequences for consumers and leads this to be one of my very, very favorite watches. And in fact, if I had to sell every watch but one at this point, this might be the one I end up keeping, or maybe the other regular Reef, right? But it has good choices of straps, bezels, good function, easy repair. It's got all the things I want out there. And so this is the best watch that showed up on my table this year by a pretty substantial margin. And it is just plain a really good watch. On the knife end, so we're going to start high end and then go a little bit down. I mean, on the highest end, maybe the nicest knife I handled this year was actually the Scott Sobey Swift. I have a video up about that. I don't have it anymore. It went back to Tony Scullambrini, sadly. But it is good on him, but yeah. It's a really nice piece, and I think it shows a generation that is very different than the kind of things I show off on the channel. Also on the high end, this little guy right here is the Herman Knives Mantis. The review hasn't gone up at the time that I posted this. I'm waiting for them to have a little bit more availability, right? But this is an absolutely wonderful knife, and it's a reminder that the high-end CNC-made stuff has gotten really so good that it's just freaking ridiculous. Herman is playing with the very best of the best, and this may have been the nicest new knife that I had on my table here that one could actually potentially purchase. And then also one other high-end piece. This isn't a 2022 release at all, but this is the We Knives Drescaton. I ended up picking this guy up from a friend in 2022, and this is a knife that is completely ridiculous. It's barely a knife, but it is a wonderful reminder of a time, and it's brought me a lot of joy, which is why it's here, right? Both because it reminds me of somebody who, unfortunately, the industry lost in 2022, Elijah Isham, the designer here, but it also reminds me of a time when we had a lot of really interesting effort and a lot of designs that were wildly different, as opposed to 2022, which feels like all the designs are basically the same. So I really hope that things like this can exist again in the future, that people will try crazy things in the future, rather than just doing the same basic idea over and over again. And so in a lot of ways, this, to me, is both a symbol of incredible creativity and, sadly, a reminder of what we lost this year, but it is also a symbol of what I hope we can get back to, even if we come up with something way more functional than this. This is everything that we haven't gotten in 2022, and it makes me a little bit sad. Okay, now into more reasonable territory, although it's still reasonable at pushing it, right? One of the biggest shocks this year for me was actually not a knife at all, but a set of scales. These are a set of scales for the Spyderco PM2 by RG Custom Metalworks. These are a set of scales for the PM2 along with a beautiful clip that turn this into something entirely new and different. This is a Spyderco PM2, but it feels every bit like a luxury object along the lines of, well, anything I've had on the table, right? These are the nicest aftermarket scales I've ever handled, and this is the finish that they ship with, right? They are just really, really good. They are not cheap. They are $260 for the scales and clip, plus the cost of a PM2, so about $470 total. But frankly, these are so nice that I think they're worth that price, right? To get a very, very nice high-end functional knife, that is the Spyderco PM2, which is a really, really nice knife, even if it's a little big for my taste, but to get a really nice, high-performing quality knife that now feels like a really nice high-end luxury object, this is very, very nice. And in fact, these are nice enough that I ended up buying a separate PM2 to wear with them. To put these guys on, to carry with them, because, I have to have my other PM2 around for size comparison. So you're actually going to see this set of scales on the PM2 for size comparison a bunch, because I only had one. So anyways, this has been a very, very nice surprise. And although it's a set of scales rather than a new knife, it really makes an old knife feel like a very new knife, and I think that's a beautiful thing. Speaking of scale upgrades, another thing that's been a joy is the Demco 80-20.5 in titanium. The 80-20, the full-size big boy, do I have easy access to him? Is this drawer going to open? Yeah, I think so. The 80-20.5 is a large and ridiculous knife. This was the original 80-20.5 that I purchased. And, 80-20. The 80-20.5 is the same basic idea, but at a size that is reasonable, at a size that actually works for me, right? The 80-20 was a high-end Knife of the Year nominee a couple of years ago, with a great lock, a great blade, a lot to love about it, but this is just that, but with dimensions that make sense for my life. It is thinner on every dimension. It is a better cutting tool on every dimension because the blade stock is thinner. It is just, in a lot of ways, what the 80-20 always should have been for me in my particular life. So for me, this has actually brought a lot of joy. It has replaced the 80-20 in my collection. This guy's pending sale to a buddy. But nonetheless, it is absolutely that's been a joy. Speaking of actually scales, I can't make this a winner, certainly, because the TRM Neutron is a knife I've been well familiar with for a long time. But one thing that has become more available this year are the titanium scales, the high-end scales for these guys. Again, change this into something fundamentally different. I think one of the things that you should take away from this is that very often a knife, in order to be incredible, doesn't necessarily need a whole redesign. It needs a little bit of an upgrade, right? And that way you can get a TRM Atom at a normal price point with a G10, and then later on, see, that's one of the most beautiful parts about upgrading, your parts, right? Upgradability turns out to be useful and important. We'll come back to that a couple of times this year, today. But I gotta say, with the titanium scales on there, for me, being a giant snob, this could be a one knife, right? At this point in time, if I had to just keep one, this would be a pretty good argument for which one to keep. It's a really good piece. The next one that's come along, I've been talking about how 2022 was a year of boring, a year of same old, nothing different. This is absolutely the exception. This is the Winterblade Co-Factor. This is the most innovative knife of the year by a mile. And the reason I say that is, well, for a bunch of things. But one of the biggest ones is that everything is magnetic. This is not a knife that deploys with springs. This is a knife that deploys with magnets. The tent is magnetic. The lock is magnetic. It is completely wild. It is unlike anything I have ever seen before in the knife market, or at least everything I had seen before he came along and did this. And this has been released, self-published, so to speak, and is something that truly merits interest. This is the most innovative thing that happened this year, and I feel like I can say that, because I've been trying to keep a very strong eye out for innovation and new stuff in the world of knives, and I think this wins. And so insofar as I have one choice for my favorite knife of the year for 2022, it's probably going to be this guy. Not necessarily because it's the one I've carried most, but because it's the one that did most for the knife market. It pushed us forward in a different direction more than anything else this year. And so that is an absolutely wonderful knife. Yeah, there's a lot of joy there. On the budget front, the Kaiser Comet is a knife that in a lot of ways, actually, I think there are easy improvements, right? I think the clip could have been swapped out. There are some ways that you can make this knife better. But the thing that actually I wanted to highlight, and one of the things that made this notable as I was thinking about what I covered this year, is that this is a budget-friendly knife. I mean, given it's a little more pricey still, it's around $80, but it is also showing off design. It is doing things that are a little bit new and different, right? It's using different materials. It's doing interesting ideas. This is a budget knife that still does things interesting, that feels different, that clears its orbit, unlike a lot of the other things that have come out this year. And so it's a joy for me to see small makers, this is in this case Munko knives, it's a joy for me to see makers doing innovative things and cool designs at the budget end still, rather than only coming in the 300 or 400 range with the self-published kind of things. Then finally on the budget front, one of my very favorite budget knives, in fact my very favorite budget knife for the year I would say, is actually this guy right here. This is the Sencut Saxe. Apparently, I didn't know this when I filmed the original review, but apparently this guy is named after a small town in Texas because it was released at Blade Show, Texas. So there you go, and now that part makes some sense. But this is a knife that is very profoundly boring in terms of its design, and but it's very effective in terms of its execution. This is a very solid little pocket knife and a reasonable choice for a lot of people. If you just need a knife and you don't want fancy design, you don't want anything else, this could be a nice choice. And so insofar as I'm choosing a budget knife of the year, this would probably be it, even though I don't care for the vanilla-ness of the design, for the fact that it is same old, and if we put it up next to like these two, it's like, wow, that's why the Comet's here, because if these two touch, I explode, right? But nonetheless, it's a boring knife, but it's a very good one, and it's coming in at a good price point. And so, for me at least, in the knife world, these are going to be my knives of the year. And if I had to just pick one, it's going to be the Factor, because that's the thing that did something nothing else did. On the pen front, the pen front, like I said, has been very strange and very nice in a lot of ways. It's been more enjoyable, I think, than a lot of things. Sorry, I just realized I forgot something. But one of my very favorite companies for a long time has been Urban Survival Gear. And they have produced knives like this. This is the TIE Scribe Go in the hexed pattern. And this was a pen that I carried for a non-trivial part of this year, right? This was a very, very good pen. But they have been producing pens for a long time, but they have recently changed. They have been reborn as smooth precision pens, right? It says right there, smooth precision pens, the very top there. This is a very, very smooth and very, very precise pen. And so I love 100% seeing small companies doing these kinds of fundamental changes to themselves. And more importantly, I love the direction they're going, selling their pens with kits, including all the tools required to disassemble them, and to do so very well. Talking about upgradability, talking about part interchangeability as a pro, rather than just being yeah, I guess you could do that, right? Doing, creating collectors clubs and doing, rather than selling limited editions that are functionally different, selling limited editions that are just aesthetically different. These are the same pen, effectively, except this one has been machined to look like a freaking dragon. If I can only buy this one because this one isn't available, that's fine, right? They're almost functionally equivalent. Oh, this guy's lighter, which is actually very, very nice. But it's an absolutely beautiful thing to see both the innovation in terms of trying crazy patterns, which has definitely been a thing that this company has been all about for a while now, but also seeing the innovation in terms of trying to push the products forward in a different way, trying to focus on repairability, upgradability, that kind of thing, while continuing to make these guys in the States, which is, at least for me, an absolutely beautiful thing. And so, for me, 100% smooth precision pens, and I'll go ahead and I'll just say the V2 generally. This has been my favorite pen of this year. It takes what was already a very, very nice pen, that is the TIE Scribe series, and it creates something, well, better. And now that he's doing crazy things, which is really what Kelvin over there at Smooth Precision does best, yeah, this is incredible. And so for me, the Smooth Precision Pens V2 is the pen of the year, without any real question there. In terms of lights, honestly, there's nothing that lit up my life enough to be on this list. I mean, there are flashlights that are fine, but this was a very bad year for flashlights, so it's just not that interesting. In terms of other gear, there are a couple of other things that have been very interesting to me and that have been bringing me some joy. And I'll go ahead and I'll move some things slowly off the camera here. That way I've got some more space. One of the things that has brought me unexpected amounts of joy this year is actually this guy right here. This is the, I can barely get, nope, I can't show this off on camera. I'll put in a picture. This is a VanQuest AdX, and it's the AdX 25. This is a backpack that is very, very nice, and it has a lot of the intelligence. I haven't filmed my review of it yet because I've been really enjoying carrying it and whatnot, but if it tells you anything, I actually bought another one in black when I had originally gotten the gray one. This is a pack that has got all of the brilliance of the VanQuest kind of packs, but it has less of the tacticality, I think, that can be a little bit cloying from some of the, in some lives. So that's been an amazing pack, and it's been one I've been appreciating. Another piece of gear that isn't something I really talk about on the channel much, but I actually have already shown off, is this little guy right here. This is a laptop from Framework, right? And this is actually wearing a fancy skin at the moment. I figured, why the heck not? Gave it a try. But this has actually really surprised me in how much I've been enjoying it. I did a full upgrade of it, and you can watch me disassemble and maintain a laptop on my on the channel there if you're curious. But one of the things that brings me joy about Framework is that they are committed to reparability, to upgradability. I have already taken out the motherboard that I got the laptop with originally and replaced it with a new one with that other old motherboard now functioning as its own standalone computer in my office, right? That's a beautiful thing. And the fact that they are open, the fact that they are working very hard for Linux support and whatnot, has made this very, very easy. And in fact, not so long ago, unfortunately, I was riding home in a rainstorm on a bike, and my MacBook Air became a MacBook Water. And as a result, I just need a MacBook Earth and a MacBook Fire, and boom. But nonetheless, and I wasn't able to clean the water out of it because it's not built to be repaired, whereas this guy I could have. And those kinds of things just made me realize, wow, I should be putting my money with a company that is trying to help me as a consumer rather than just trying to make me spend more money all the time. So the Framework has brought me a lot of joy, and as I've, transitioned over to Linux, which has been its own source of both joy and pain, oh boy, in roughly equal measure, but it's been very interesting, and I did not expect to move into this as my main laptop during the course of this year, but I sure have, and I don't mind it. It's performed exceptionally well. Then finally, maybe my very favorite piece of gear that I'm completely biased about this year, outside of that realm, is this little guy right here. This is the Nick Shabazz disassembly tool holder, and this is freely available on my GitHub website for you to print yourself. I printed this guy on a 3D printer, but it has been actually very, very useful. It's been very valuable to be able to just grab this guy and bring it down to the kitchen table if I'm just taking something apart because it needs a little bit of love, right? It's been really useful to have on the desk so I can just pick up all of my tools at once and move them back over there. And the fact that it's available to everybody for free is, at least in my mind, a beautiful thing. And it's something that I hope has been helpful and useful and interesting for people to try. So I wanted to throw in a plug, not because I'm making any money, but because I genuinely think this is a cool thing and want people to be able to enjoy it. So anyways, there is that. But that's brought me a lot of joy this year. So anyways, that is my gear of the year for this year. If I had to choose absolutely one pen, it's going to be the Urban Survival gear. If I had to choose absolutely one knife, it's absolutely going to be the Factor here. If I had to choose one watch, we are 100% looking at the Formex Reef. And, the other stuff is so many different categories that I can't go there. But 2022 has been a very weird year in pretty much every sense. I hope 2023 is a whole lot easier in a lot of ways for everybody in every way. But most importantly, I hope it is a wonderful year for all of you and that you have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of the day and that there continue to be wonderful gems out there in the wild for us to enjoy of every variety. Have a good one, everybody. Bye now.